The majority of children in my grade decided to pick on me was probably in second grade. I don't like recess because then I have to play with you. I felt like a dog back then. Only idiots and freaks watch those things. So she would call me like retarded and an idiot.
A victim of bullying will experience various degrees of trauma that will not only affect her emotionally, but also permanently alter the anatomy of her brain.
My name is Bella Morgan. Go to Sears. It is very cookie cutter.
Yeah.
You are either the cookie with you're either the same cookie for everyone, or you need to go away.
It is the more vulnerable child, the child who's a little bit different or a little more sensitive, who doesn't fit in with the rest of the crowd. Their differences are emphasized, they're made fun of, and it's difficult for the children to know what to do about it.
6th grade, I started coming out of my shell after I became friends with this girl. She was really nice. 7th grade, halfway through, that close friend decided it would be totally fun to just put me in any sort of situation that she could find. She would kick me a lot. She would kick me in the shins. At one point it was hard to walk. I would wake up and it would be just agony too. She was the only person who would talk to me on a regular basis. She was the only social contact I had. So I clung.
Either they don't feel they have any friends, especially if they don't feel they have any friends, or the friends that they did have, went over to the other side, and usually they feel they have no recourse. They're sort of stuck.
And then about a quarter way through 8th grade, my best friend, who's still my best friend today, came, and people would call us gay and lesbian. It definitely hurt, especially when the teachers were just across the other way and you didn't really see anyone doing anything.
Chronic feelings of helpless light up that part of the brain that then continues, reinforces that feeling of helplessness. And if you feel helpless long enough, you feel depressed.
Bella experienced symptoms of depression, but because she never told anyone, she was never diagnosed.
I would fake illnesses to go to the nurse a lot. I isolated myself because I didn't want to deal with any of those people anymore. I stayed away. I stayed at the corners of the classroom. I didn't talk to anybody.
Bella most likely experienced depression because of a lack of neurogenesis.
The neurogenesis is the ability to make the new connections. And so if you don't have the ability to make those connections, you're not going to have the ability to make the memories.
Daniel Peterson, a neuroscientist at the Chicago Medical School, explains that in the hippocampus of a bullied brain, neurogenesis is taking place at a normal rate, but a high percentage of the neurons die off before becoming fully mature.
I had a breakdown and I ran and locked myself in the girls' bathroom because I made a mistake and the whole class started laughing at me.
Neurogenesis regulates stress, and if there are no neurons, it is difficult to stop that stress. Stress from a lack of neurogenesis is the most common way depression is caused in a bullied brain.
Sometimes I kind of go back, especially if I'm put into the Sears setting again, as I like to call it.
Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event. 33% of bullied children experience symptoms of PTSD.
Someone who's been bullied long enough, someone just looking at them will trigger that anxious response or that depressed response. It's a combination of anxiety and depression.
Definitely if I'm put back into another Sears setting, I definitely start reverting back into the emotions that I had and not being able to access the techniques I learned to deal with it.
What we're looking at is sort of an emotional memory here, and what's happening with the hippocampus is it will create neural pathways. So one neuron talk to another, and they can actually track then when you show somebody something familiar, that the same pathway will continue to fire each time. So it literally is setting up sort of a hardwired nature to memory.
The hippocampus plays a large role in PTSD. High levels of cortisol can destroy cells in the hippocampus. So what is cortisol?
So cortisol is a hormone that the body releases under stressful conditions. So if you're fighting a bear, your body's going to release tons of cortisol. And what it does is it shuts down your immune response. Basically, it stops all the normal functioning of the body so that you can deal with that stress, which is great in that moment. Like, it'll stop me from bleeding, it'll stop me from swelling, it'll stop me because it'll stop pain because I don't want that stuff in the fighting of the bear moment. But what you don't want is you don't want that cortisol in your system all the time, because then again it's suppressing your immune system. It limits growth, it limits development. If it's in your body consistently, it'll inhibit your ability to go through daily functions.
Now a psychiatrist in Plano says the victims of bullying can also be the victims of post-traumatic stress disorder. Take a look at the center of the brain that's white. Dr. Todd Clement says that's where they see the similarity.
When PTSD is triggered and cortisol levels spike, the whiteness in the previous picture indicates the high amounts of cortisol. This is commonly seen in Vietnam combat veterans, child abuse victims, and most recently, victims of bullying.
The brain gets conditioned to react. In other words, if they cannot make a change in their relationships, they can respond in that subservient, negative interaction kind of way. So if they can't fix it, it can go on, and then they can have adult relationships like that, where they are picked on, either by their spouse or by their employer or whatever. You will find that the kids who are least scarred are the kids who have the best support system at home.
I felt very lonely. My mom would ask me how my day went, but she had her hands full with my sister sometimes. So she only knew that I didn't really have many friends, and I never really told my dad about any of it. My sister, yeah, she knew it. She was popular for a little bit, and then she ended up getting really, really badly bullied at Sears, which is what my mom was really focusing on. She didn't realize any of it was going on in the younger years. I ignored them until I graduated. I never really dealt with the problem.
Ignoring is not always that successful. It really depends. It really depends. It's not always that successful. And they can't ignore something that is culturally normal. Guys diss each other. Now maybe that's not bullying, but it can turn into that if you're not comfortable with it. So you can't change society, so you have to work with society. So what I usually do is I take the football, we throw the football back and forth, and I start to practice, that kind of jiving that they do with each other. And they get more comfortable with it, so that when it happens in real life, they're able to go along with it and not be hurt.
I would either leave right after school, or I would stay as late as I could. I was always in the locker room first, out of the locker room first, and I would sit in my little place and I would refuse to talk to anyone.
I'm criticized, but all your bullets ricochet. You shoot me down.
Congrats, you survived Sears. It's definitely a lot better today. I have way more friends here, and definitely way more friends who are supportive. Those words and those doubts they planted in my head are going to forever be there. If you crumple up a piece of paper and you iron it out, it's never going to be the same pristine sheet you had before. It's a lot better at the freshman campus. Nowadays, if someone addresses me about it, I will tell them, and then I will go to the advisors. I say, just so you know, I experienced some bullying. I don't want to give names or anything, but I just want you to know it's still in the school. So it's still a problem. Every time I tell them, they seem more surprised.
You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium.